Can I play you a song?
Those 6 words, whispered by a janitor in a wrinkled uniform, would shatter the silence of the most prestigious charity gala in the city and crack open 3 wounded hearts that had forgotten how to feel. But let me take you back to the moment before everything changed, to the second, when a 7-year-old girl with wild strawberry blonde curls collapsed on cold marble, while 300 of the city's most powerful people froze in absolute shock. 3 nannies had already failed to reach her. A child specialist had knelt beside her and come up empty. Her billionaire mother, the woman who had built a technology empire from nothing, could only watch helplessly as her blind daughter's crisis shattered the most important night of her career. And then, from the shadows where invisible people do invisible work, a man in a janitor's uniform dropped his cleaning cart and walked toward the screaming child. He moved past the stunned crowd, past the security guards who tried to stop him, past the desperate mother in the stunning red dress, and he knelt beside the little girl and whispered those 6 impossible words. Can I play you a song? What nobody in that glittering ballroom knew, what the CEO watching through her tiaras couldn't possibly have guessed, was that this invisible man had once sold out concert halls across the country, that he had walked away from everything 4 years ago when his twin son drowned at a lake house on a sunny afternoon, that the lullaby now filling the ballroom, the melody that would calm a child in crisis and bring 300 people to tears, was the very song he had promised to play for his boy on the night he died. A promise he broke, a later that never came, words he never got to say. And somewhere across the city, in a small Brooklyn apartment, his other son waited with a neighbor, a 6-year-old boy who hadn't spoken a single word since the day he watched his twin brother slip beneath the water. What happened in that ballroom would prove that sometimes the person who saves you has been hiding in plain sight all along, waiting for the moment when invisible becomes everything. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you are watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and your comments mean everything to us. Now let me tell you how we got here. The Ashford Technologies annual charity gala was the kind of event that made headlines for weeks. Held in the Grand Meridian Hotel's legendary Crystal Ballroom, it drew the most powerful names in business, technology, and politics. Crystal chandeliers, the size of small cars, hung from vaulted ceilings, painted with Renaissance-style murals. Champagne towers sparkled under carefully designed lighting. Designer gowns, worth more than most people's yearly salaries, swept across marble floors that had been polished until they reflected like mirrors. By 8 o'clock that evening, the gala had already raised $3.2 million for children's education initiatives, and the night was just getting started. Tech moguls whispered deals in corners. Venture capitalists whose single decisions could move markets clinked glasses with senators who shaped policy. Journalists circulated with carefully neutral expressions, cataloging every interaction for tomorrow's business pages. And at the center of it all, commanding attention without even trying, stood Vivienne Ashford, 33 years old and absolutely untouchable. Vivienne moved through her gala like a queen surveying her kingdom. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant twist that exposed the graceful line of her neck. Her dress was a masterpiece of design, a stunning scarlet red that hugged her curves like it had been painted on with a neckline that drew the eye without crossing into impropriety. Diamond drop earrings caught the chandelier lighted with every turn of her head, sending tiny rainbows dancing across her collarbones. Her heels added 4 inches to her already impressive height, and she walked in them like she had been born wearing stilettos. Every head turned when she passed. Conversations paused. Men forgot what they were saying mid-sentence. Women studied her with a mixture of envy and admiration that Vivian had long ago learned to ignore. She had built Ashford Technologies from a startup operating out of her studio apartment to a billion-dollar empire in under a decade. She had done it while raising a daughter alone, while fighting off investors who thought a young single mother couldn't possibly understand the tech industry, while proving wrong every person who had ever underestimated her. Tonight was supposed to be her triumph. The gala was the public-facing celebration, but the real victory would come at 9 o'clock when she announced the merger that would cement Ashford Technologies as a global powerhouse. 3 years of negotiation, thousands of hours of work, and enough stress to turn her hair grey if she hadn't been vigilant about her salon appointments. Everything was perfect, but beneath the armor of her designer dress and her carefully constructed confidence, Vivian carried a weight that no one in this room could see. Every few minutes, her eyes would drift toward the VIP room at the back of the ballroom, where her daughter Rosie was supposed to be safely contained with 3 rotating nannies. Rosie was 7 years old, born blind due to a rare optic nerve condition, and she experienced the world in ways that most people couldn't begin to understand. Sounds that others barely noticed could overwhelm her. Smells that faded into the background, for everyone else, could assault her senses like physical blows. Crowds were nightmares of competing sensory information, a chaos of noise and smell and unpredictable movement that her brilliant mind couldn't filter or control. Vivienne had spent months preparing for tonight, creating a safe space for Rosie, hiring 3 experienced special needs nannies to rotate shifts, setting up a quiet room with Rosie's favorite textures and sounds. She had done everything right, but as she smiled at the senator and discussed education funding, as she charmed an investor who had been on the fence about the merger, as she played the role of confident CEO with the ease of long practice, Vivian couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. She had no idea how right she was. In the VIP room behind the ballroom, Rosie Ashford sat on a velvet couch, her small fingers tracing the textured wallpaper that had been specially installed for events like this. She had her collection of smooth stones spread out on the cushion beside her, each one found on different walks with her mother, each one carrying memories that Rosie could feel with her fingertips. "This room smells purple and scratchy," Rosie announced to Maria, her favorite nanny who had been with them for 2 years. Maria was used to Rosie's synesthetic descriptions by now, the way the little girl assigned colors and textures to everything she experienced, even things that most people wouldn't think could have colors at all. "Purple and scratchy isn't so bad, is it?" Maria asked, settling into the chair beside the couch. "Better than the orange and sticky from last week's doctor's office." Rosie nodded seriously. Orange and sticky was the worst. "But I can hear the music from out there." She tilted her head toward the wall, separating them from the ballroom. "It sounds like gold, with fuzzy edges. I want to feel it closer." "The music is just for the grown-ups right now, sweetheart. You can listen from here, but I can't feel it from here." Rosie's fingers found her favorite stone, the perfectly smooth oval one from the beach trip 3 summers ago. "Music isn't just about hearing. It's about feeling it in your bones." Maria smiled at the girl's intensity. 7 years old and already so certain about everything. "Your mom will come get you for the special part, remember. Then you can feel the music." Rosie nodded, but her attention had already shifted to the sounds bleeding through the wall. The jazz band had started a new song, something with a strong bass line that Rosie could almost feel through the floor if she concentrated hard enough. When Maria stepped away to speak with one of the other nannies about the schedule, when the three women clustered near the door, discussing logistics for the next shift change, Rosie made a decision. She was tired of listening from far away. She wanted to feel the music up close, to let it wash over her, the way it did when her mother played classical recordings in their penthouse. She wanted to put her hands on the floor near the musicians and let the vibrations travel up her arms like a secret message. Rosie slipped off the couch, leaving her stones behind, and followed the guide rail that had been installed along the wall. Her cane was in her other hand, the white tip tapping softly against the floor as she moved. 19 steps to the door she had counted earlier. Left turn, then 23 steps to where the hallway opened into the main ballroom. The nannies didn't notice her leave. The moment Rosie stepped into the ballroom, the world changed. The music that had sounded like gold, with fuzzy edges from behind the wall, became a crashing wave of sound bouncing off marble floors and high ceilings, multiplying and echoing until Rosie couldn't tell where any of it was coming from. The bass she had wanted to feel became a physical pressure against her chest. The jazz trumpet that had seemed bright and interesting from a distance now pierced her ears like something sharp and hostile. And the smells, oh, the smells. Rosie had always had an extraordinary sense. Smell compensation, perhaps, for the sense she lacked. And now that ability became her enemy. Hundreds of perfumes and colognes mixed together into a cloud that tasted like metal and two sweet flowers fighting each other. Food smells from the catering stations clashed with the candle wax from decorative arrangements and the chemical undertone of the floor polish. Each smell demanded her attention, screaming over the others, impossible to filter or ignore. Voices surrounded her, laughter she couldn't attach to faces, conversation fragments that overlapped into meaningless noise, the rustle of expensive fabric as people moved past her without seeing her, the clink of champagne glasses like tiny bells ringing discordantly from every direction. Rosie's hands flew to her ears, but it didn't help. The noise wasn't just coming from outside her. It was inside now, bouncing around her skull, making it impossible to think. She stumbled forward, disoriented, her cane swinging wildly as she lost track of her orientation. Her carefully practiced mental map of the world became useless in this chaos of sensation. She didn't know which way she had come from, didn't know where safe was, didn't know anything except that everything was too much. Her small body collided with something cold and wet, and she heard gasps around her, felt liquid splash against her dress. She had walked into the chocolate fountain, she would realize later, the elaborate centerpiece that no one had thought to warn her about. No, Rosie whispered, but the whisper turned into something louder as the panic took hold. No, 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 no. The first scream cut through the polite murmur of conversation like a knife through silk, and every head in the ballroom turned toward the source. Rosie Ashford stood near the chocolate fountain, her light blue dress stained brown, her wild strawberry blonde curls escaping from their carefully arranged ponytail, her unseeing pale eyes wide with terror. Her hands pressed against her ears so hard that her knuckles had gone white, and the sounds coming from her throat were raw animal sounds of a child in complete sensory overload. For a moment, nobody moved. 300 of the city's most powerful people stood frozen, champagne glasses suspended halfway to lips, conversations dying unfinished, uncertain how to respond to this disruption to their elegant evening. Then Rosie's legs gave out and she collapsed onto the cold marble floor. The spell broke. Whispers erupted like fire, spreading through dry grass. Is that the CEO's daughter? Poor thing. What's wrong with her? Where's her mother? Someone should do something. But the whispers were soft compared to Rosie's screams, which had escalated into a high-pitched wailing that made several guests visibly wince. Her small body curled on the marble, shaking violently, completely unreachable. Across the ballroom, Vivian heard the scream and felt her blood turn to ice. She was mid-sentence with a board member when the sound hit her, and she didn't even excuse herself before she started moving. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble, faster and faster. But the crowd was thick, and people were turning toward the commotion rather than clearing a path, and she wasn't fast enough. Not here, not now, not in front of everyone. The thoughts raced through her mind, even as her body pushed through the crowd. She could feel the stares, already could sense the judgment forming behind polished smiles and concerned expressions. Tomorrow's headlines were writing themselves with every second her daughter screamed on that floor. Maria reached Rosie first, dropping to her knees beside the thrashing child, pulling out the worn stuffed butterfly that had been Rosie's favorite comfort object since she was 2. Rosie, sweetheart, Mr. Wings is here. Feel him, honey? It's okay, you're okay, Mr. Wings is here. Maria's voice was soft and practiced calm in the way that only experienced caregivers can manage during a crisis. She held the stuffed butterfly close to Rosie's face, close enough that the girl could smell the familiar fabric, could feel the worn velvet wings against her cheek. But Rosie's hand came up and knocked Mr. Wings away with surprising force. The stuffed butterfly flew across the marble landing near the feet of a woman in a Valentino gown who stepped back as if it were something contagious. Rosie's screams intensified, turning into a high-pitched keening that made the crystal chandeliers seem to vibrate in sympathy. The second nanny rushed forward with a bag full of sensory tools. Textured balls, weighted lap pads, things that usually work to ground Rosie when the world became too much. She knelt on Rosie's other side, professional and determined. Remember these, Rosie, the soft one, the bumpy one, here feel the bumpy one. Get away! Rosie thrashed violently, her small fists hitting air, her feet kicking against the marble. Everything is too much. Make it stop. Make it stop. The crowd had formed a loose circle now, a ring of designer gowns and tuxedos surrounding the spectacle. Some people had pulled out their phones, and Vivian felt a flash of rage cut through her panic. They were recording her daughter's worst moment, and they were recording it like entertainment. She finally broke through the circle, dropping to her knees beside her daughter, without any thought for her expensive dress or the marble cold against her skin. Rosie, baby, mommy's here. Mommy's here, sweetheart. But Rosie was beyond hearing, beyond comfort, lost somewhere in the overwhelming chaos of her own senses. Her screams continued, each one driving into Vivian's heart like a physical wound. The third nanny tried a different approach, crouching low and speaking in calm, measured tones. Rosie, let's go to the quiet room. Remember the soft chairs? Your favorite music. We can go there right now. Just take my hand. Rosie's crying intensified. Snot and tears streamed down her face. Her body had gone rigid now, every muscle locked in panic, and her breathing had become rapid and shallow between screams. Dr. Patricia Webb stepped out of the crowd, a child psychologist who happened to be attending as a guest, recognizing a crisis when she saw one. She was in her 60s, with silver hair and kind eyes, and she moved with the confidence of someone who had handled situations like this many times before. "May I?" she asked Vivienne, already kneeling beside Rosie, without waiting for an answer. Her hands moved through practiced techniques, applying gentle pressure to specific points, attempting to ground the child through physical sensation. Her voice was steady as stone. "Rosie, I want you to breathe with me, in through your nose. Can you feel the floor under you? It's cold and hard, isn't it? Focus on that feeling." For a moment, just a heartbeat, Rosie's screams quieted to sobs. The crowd collectively held its breath. Vivienne felt a flicker of hope light in her chest. Then Rosie's cries exploded louder than before, as if the brief moment of quiet had only given her lungs more power to express her terror. The wailing echoed off the vaulted ceiling, bouncing back down on them like judgment. Dr. Webb's professional mask slipped for just a second, uncertainty flashing across her experienced features. She had tried everything she knew, and this child was still drowning. That's when Vivienne understood, with terrible clarity, if the expert couldn't reach her daughter, nothing would. She felt the weight of every stare in the room, like physical pressure against her skin. Board members were exchanging glances that she could interpret without even looking. She's supposed to lead our company, and she can't even control her own daughter. Investors were checking their watches, already calculating whether this incident would affect their portfolio decisions. Journalists' fingers were itching toward their phones, composing tomorrow's headlines in their minds. Billionaire CEO's daughter has meltdown at charity gala. Ashford Technologies event descends into chaos. Ice Queen Vivienne Ashford, helpless as child screams for help. Vivienne Ashford, who had built an empire on control and strategy, and seeing 3 moves ahead, had never felt so small in her entire life. Her daughter was drowning right in front of her, and she couldn't do a single thing to save her. Through a service entrance that most guests would never notice, the kind of door that blends into the wallpaper, because the wealthy prefer not to think about how their champagne glasses get refilled or their trash gets emptied. Nathan Cole pushed his cleaning cart into the edge of the ballroom. He was 36 years old, with short brown hair that was slightly damp from the exertion of hauling trash bins up from the basement, and he wore the standard issue uniform of Ashford Technologies' custodial staff, the uniform that made him completely invisible to people like the ones filling this room. His hands gripped the cart's handle with deliberate steadiness, a pianist's hands doing janitor's work, the calluses of his new life covering the muscle memory of his old one. Nathan was supposed to be emptying the waste bins in the corporate offices upstairs, far away from the gala and its glittering guests. The event coordinator had been very clear about that during the staff briefing. All custodial staff will maintain positions on upper floors during the event. Under no circumstances are you to enter the main ballroom. If you see a guest, make yourself scarce. You are not to be seen. You are not to be heard. You are not to exist as far as anyone downstairs is concerned. Nathan had nodded along with the other janitors, accepting his invisibility with the same numbness he had accepted everything else over the past 3 years. Invisibility was the point. Invisibility was safety. Invisibility meant he could move through the world without anyone asking questions he didn't want to answer. His radio crackled with the event coordinator's frantic voice. All staff maintain positions. Do not enter the main ballroom until further notice. There is a situation being handled. Nathan continued pushing his cart toward the service elevator, already thinking about the trash bins on the 47th floor and how he could finish his route early enough to catch the last subway home. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, was watching Liam, and she had her own grandchildren to deal with. He didn't like to impose any longer than necessary. Then he heard it, even through the heavy service door, even over the ambient hum of the building's ventilation system and the rattle of his cart's wheels. The sound reached him clearly. A child screaming. Nathan's feet stopped moving. His hands went white-knuckled on the cart's handle. The scream came again, and this time Nathan could hear what kind of scream it was. Not anger, not a tantrum, not a child throwing a fit because they wanted something they couldn't have. This was pure terror. This was a child drowning in a world they couldn't control, crying out for someone, anyone to save them. Nathan knew that sound. He had heard it once before, 4 years ago, on a sunny afternoon at a lake house that was supposed to be a family vacation. He had been inside the cabin practicing a new piece on the rented upright piano they'd had delivered, because he couldn't go a week without playing, not then, not when his career was finally taking off. His wife Sarah had been making lunch. The twins were playing near the water's edge, 5 years old, and full of the boundless energy that came with being young and healthy and loved. Lucas and Liam mirror images of each other, except for the small birthmark behind Liam's left ear splashing in the shallows while the adults prepared food just 50 feet away. Sarah had called for help with something in the kitchen. Nathan had looked up from the piano, annoyed at the interruption, because he was so close to getting that difficult passage right. He'd gone to help her just for 30 seconds. Maybe 45 at most. That's all it took. When they heard Liam screaming, that terrible sound that Nathan had never been able to forget. No matter how hard he tried, they'd both run outside to find Liam standing at the water's edge, alone, screaming his brother's name. Lucas was floating face down, 20 feet from shore, his small body perfectly still in water that barely came up to an adult's waist. Sarah had reached him first. Nathan had called 911 with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. The paramedics had tried for 45 minutes. Lucas was pronounced dead at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, 2 weeks before his 6th birthday. And Liam, who had watched his twin brother slip under the water, who had screamed until his voice gave out while the adults tried desperately to bring Lucas back, hadn't spoken a single word since. That was 4 years ago. 4 years of Nathan trying to hold his family together while it crumbled around him. 4 years of Sarah looking at him with blame in her eyes that eventually turned to absence when she moved across the country, unable to bear the sight of Liam's face, because it was also Lucas's face. 4 years of Nathan raising his surviving son, alone watching Liam retreat further and further into silence, giving up his music career, because every time he touched the piano, he could hear Lucas's voice asking for their bedtime lullaby. Daddy, play our song. Later, buddy. Daddy's tired. There had been no later. There would never be a later. And Nathan had buried his music in the same grave as his son taking a janitor's job because it was invisible work for an invisible man who couldn't bear to be seen anymore. The scream from the ballroom came again, and Nathan's body moved before his brain could stop it. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away. He had spent 4 years building walls specifically to avoid moments like this. 4 years staying invisible. 4 years making sure he never had to hear a child's desperate cry for help and feel his own helplessness reflected back at him. But that sound, that specific quality of terror and abandonment, it was the sound of a child alone in their worst moment while the world watched and did nothing. Nathan couldn't be too late again. He abandoned the cart without thinking, without calculating the risk to his job or his anonymity, and pushed through the service door into the ballroom. The grandeur hit him like a physical force. Crystal chandeliers scattered rainbow light across hundreds of guests in gowns and tuxedos that cost more than his yearly salary. Champagne towers sparkled. The scent of expensive perfume and catered food washed over him. But Nathan barely noticed any of it. His eyes found the crowd gathered in a loose circle near the center of the room, and he pushed toward it, ignoring the surprised looks from people who weren't used to seeing janitors at events like this. A security guard stepped into his path, a large man with an earpiece and the expression of someone who dealt with people who didn't belong. "Sir, you can't be here. This area is restricted to guests only." Nathan heard himself speak, his voice rough from disuse in social situations. "Please, let me try. You need to return to your station immediately, or I'll have to escort you out." But Nathan was already moving past him, driven by something he couldn't name, and wouldn't have fought even if he could. The guard reached for his arm, but Nathan sidestepped without thinking, his body remembering years of navigating crowded concert halls and backstage areas, muscle memory from a life he had tried to forget. The crowd parted for him, some in surprise, some in offense that a janitor was walking through their midst, some simply too stunned by the evening's events to process this new strangeness. Nathan didn't care about any of them. He could only see the little girl on the floor, could only hear her cries mixing with the echoes of a familiar scream from 4 years ago. She was maybe 7 years old, with wild strawberry blonde curls spread across the marble around her head like a halo. Her eyes were open but unfocused, staring at nothing, and Nathan realized with a jolt that she was blind. Her face was red and streaked with tears, her whole body rigid with panic, and the sounds coming from her throat were the sounds of someone who had been overwhelmed past the point of reason. 3 women in nanny uniforms stood nearby, their faces pale with helplessness. An older woman in professional attire, clearly some kind of specialist, was backing away with uncertainty written across her features. And standing above them all, frozen in her stunning red dress, was a blonde woman whose expression caught Nathan somewhere between fury and desperation. He didn't know who she was. He didn't care. All he could see was the child. Nathan dropped to his knees beside her, ignoring the shocked gasps from the crowd around him. His knees hit the cold marble hard, but he barely felt it. His entire focus narrowed to the small, terrified girl in front of him. The nannies backed away, uncertain. The specialist stood up, her professional mask slipping further with every second. The woman in the red dress stared at him with ice-cold eyes that held a warning Nathan chose to ignore. He leaned close to the little girl, close enough that his voice could cut through her panic and reach whatever part of her mind was still listening. "Can I play you a song?" The words came out soft, steady, certain, exactly the way he used to speak to Liam on the worst nights when the nightmares came and his son would shake in his arms, unable to voice the terror trapped inside him. The little girl's screaming faltered. Her breath hitched. Her unseeing eyes turned toward the sound of his voice, toward this new presence that was calm and steady and safe in a world that had become nothing but chaos. Nathan reached out slowly, deliberately, telegraphing his movements, even though she couldn't see them. His hand touched hers, small and hot and trembling, and he felt her fingers curl around his, instinctively holding on like he was an anchor in a storm. "I know the world is too loud right now," Nathan said softly, speaking just to her, as if the 300 people watching them didn't exist. "Let me make it quieter." He stood still, holding her hand, and looked around the ballroom until his eyes found what he needed. There, on a raised platform near the center of the room, stood a concert grand piano. black and gleaming under the chandelier light. It was probably worth more than Nathan would make in 5 years at his current job. It had sat there all night as a decorative showpiece, something beautiful for wealthy people to admire while they discussed their stock portfolios and charitable donations. But Nathan saw something else when he looked at that piano. He saw the instrument that had been his whole world before grief took it away. He saw the keys that had once moved under his fingers like extensions of his soul. He saw the thing he had been running from for 4 years, waiting for him, like it had always known he would come back. His mind screamed at him to stop. 4 years. You haven't touched a piano in 4 years. You swore you'd never play again. You'll fall apart. You'll remember everything. The last time you played was for Lucas, the night he died, and you promised you'd never. But the little girl's hand squeezed his, and Nathan started walking toward the piano, pulling her gently along with him. The crowd parted like water before a ship's bow, shocked whispers following in his wake. Is that the janitor? What does he think he's doing? Someone should stop him. No. The blonde woman's voice cut through the murmurs sharp with authority that Nathan recognized as power, real power, the kind that came from building something out of nothing and defending it against everyone who tried to take it away. Let him try. Nathan glanced back at her. Their eyes met for just a second, and he saw something beneath the ice of her expression. Desperation, hope, the same thing he felt every time he looked at Liam and prayed that today would be the day his son finally spoke again. He kept walking. At the piano, Nathan helped the little girl onto the bench beside him. She went willingly. Her screams faded to hiccuping sobs, now her hand still clutching his, like she was afraid he would disappear if she let go. The polished wood gleamed under the chandeliers. The keys stretched out before him, 88 pieces of black and white that had once been his entire universe. Nathan sat down and stared at them, his hands hovering inches above the keyboard, trembling. Muscle memory warred with grief. Technique battled trauma. Every fiber of his being wanted to run away from this moment, from this instrument, from the memories waiting to devour him whole. Then the little girl spoke, her voice small and hoarse from screaming. Please make it quiet. Everything is so loud and I can't make it stop. Nathan's hands came down. The first note was middle C, a single sound ringing out across the ballroom, clear and pure and perfect. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the little girl's sobs stopped as she felt the vibration travel through the bench and into her body. Something inside Nathan's chest unlocked. His hands began to move, and the melody that emerged wasn't the showy Rachmaninoff or complex Chopin that used to fill concert halls when Nathan Cole was still a name that mattered in the music world. It was simpler than that. Gentler, more personal. It was the lullaby he had composed for his twins during his wife's pregnancy, late nights, when he couldn't sleep for excitement about the baby's coming. He had played it the night Lucas and Liam were born, had played it every night after that, watching his son's eyes drift closed, watching their tiny fingers reach toward the sound, like they were trying to catch the music and hold it. He had sworn he would never play it again after Lucas died. But now, with a blind little girl pressed against his side and 300 strangers watching in stunned silence, Nathan's fingers found the notes like coming home, and the music spilled out into the crystal ballroom, tender and warm and full of love that had nowhere else to go for 4 long years. The melody danced and lilted, rose and fell like a heartbeat, like a breath, like a father's arms rocking a child to sleep. The high notes sparkled like stars. The low notes rumbled like a heartbeat, and through it all ran a thread of grief so profound and beautiful that people in the crowd began to cry without understanding why. The little girl's sobs quieted, then stopped completely. The tension in her small body melted away like ice in sunlight. Her head tilted toward the music, and slowly, impossibly, a smile spread across her tear-stained face. Nathan watched her transformation through blurred vision, understanding something important. She could feel the vibrations through the bench, could sense the resonance in her bones. The music wasn't just sound to her, it was tangible, real, something she could hold onto in her darkness. He built the melody, adding complexity, not to show off, but to give her more. His right hand carried the main theme, while his left hand wove in harmonies, creating layers of sound that built a world around her. A world that was safe and gentle and full of light. The ballroom had gone completely still. Somewhere in the crowd, women were pressing hands to their mouths. Men were blinking hard against tears they didn't expect. Even the waitstaff had stopped moving, frozen by the unexpected beauty unfolding in front of them. The woman in the red dress stood like a statue, her ice composure finally completely cracked. Tears tracked down her face, cutting through perfect makeup, and she made no move to wipe them away. Nathan built to the crescendo, not loud, but full rich, with every emotion he had kept locked inside for 4 years. Grief and love and loss and hope, all of it pouring through his fingers and into the air. Then gently, like laying a sleeping child in a crib, he brought the melody back down, softer, sweeter, until the final note hung in the air like a prayer, like a promise, like a father saying goodbye to his son and hello to something new all at once. Silence, pure absolute silence. Then the little girl laughed, a sound of such genuine innocent joy that it hit Nathan like a physical blow. She turned her unseeing eyes toward where she sensed him sitting and threw her small arms around his neck, holding on tight. "That was beautiful," she whispered against his shoulder. It felt like flying, like butterflies made of sound. Nathan's arms came around her, automatically muscle memory, from years of hugging his sons, and something broke open inside his chest. 4 years of carefully maintained numbness. 4 years of refusing to feel because feeling meant remembering. And remembering meant drowning. He was drowning now, but somehow it felt like breathing. The ballroom erupted. The applause wasn't the polite pattering of society events. It was thunderous, genuine, shocked. People stood from their tables. Some were crying openly. Others shook their heads in disbelief at what they had just witnessed. But Nathan barely heard any of it. He just held this little girl he didn't know, feeling her heartbeat against his chest, thinking about Lucas and how much his son would have loved this child's laugh. Thinking about Lucas's voice, asking for the lullaby. Thinking about how maybe, just maybe, the music hadn't died with his son. Maybe it had just been waiting for the right moment to come back. The little girl pulled back her hands, finding Nathan's face, reading his features with her fingers the way she read the world. Her smile widened as she traced the wetness on his cheeks. "You're crying," she said. "But it's not sad crying, is it? It's the other kind." "What other kind?" "The kind that means you found something you lost." Nathan couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. He managed a small nod, even though she couldn't see it, and whispered, "Yeah, something like that." "Can you play another one?" Before Nathan could answer, he felt another presence nearby. A subtle shift in the air. The scent of expensive perfume, the weight of someone's attention, focused entirely on him. He looked up into eyes the color of a winter sky. The woman in the red dress stood there. Her carefully constructed armor shattered her expression, holding something soft, something vulnerable, something that didn't match the Ice Queen reputation that preceded her. "Thank you," she said, and her voice cracked on the words. "How did you do that? How did you reach her when no one else could?" Nathan gently extracted himself from the little girl's embrace and stood up suddenly, very aware of his janitor's uniform, of the 300 people watching, of the massive gulf between who he had been and who he had become. "I just listened to what she needed," he said quietly. No one else could reach her. Not the nannies, not the specialist. The woman's eyes searched his face like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. "But you did. In 5 minutes, you did what they couldn't do in 20. Nathan felt the familiar urge to disappear, to retreat back into his invisibility, where no one asked questions and no one expected anything from him. "I should get back to work." "Wait!" The woman's hand came up, not quite touching him, but stopping him with the gesture alone. "Please, I need to know. Who are you? Who taught you to play like that?" The question hit harder than she could possibly know. Who had taught him his grandmother, in a tiny apartment in Queens, on an out-of-tune, upright piano that had been older than she was? Juilliard professors who had called him gifted and groomed him for greatness. Life which had taught him that beautiful things could be taken away in 30 seconds of inattention. "It doesn't matter," Nathan said, and he made himself step away from the piano, from the little girl, from the woman whose eyes seemed to see right through his janitor's uniform to something underneath. "I'm nobody. I just cleaned the building." He walked away, before she could ask anything else, disappearing through the service door, while the crowd's applause still echoed off the vaulted ceiling. In the empty service corridor, Nathan made it exactly 12 steps before his legs gave out. He slid down the wall and sat on the cold floor, his whole body shaking. The grief he had held back for 4 years came crashing over him like a wave, and he buried his face in his hands and sobbed. "Lucas. Oh God, Lucas, I finally played your song." The tears came and wouldn't stop. But somewhere in the middle of all that pain, Nathan felt something else too. Something that felt almost like relief. He had played the lullaby. He had played it for a child who needed it. And the world hadn't ended after all. Nathan's key scraped against the lock 3 times before he managed to fit it into the slot. His hands still trembling from what had happened at the gala. It was nearly 2 in the morning, and the hallway of his Brooklyn apartment building was silent, except for the distant sound of a television from somewhere on the floor above. Mrs. Chen opened her door before he could even knock, her small frame wrapped in a faded housecoat, her gray hair loose around her shoulders. She had been Nathan's neighbor for 3 years, and she watched Liam most evenings without complaint, refusing payment beyond the occasional plate of whatever Nathan attempted to cook on his days off. "You're late," she said, but her voice held no accusation. "The boy is still awake?" "Wouldn't sleep, just kept drawing." Nathan's chest tightened with familiar guilt. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chen. There was a situation at work. It won't happen again." She waved away his apology with a gnarled hand. Come. You need to see what he made tonight." Nathan followed her into her apartment, which always smelled like jasmine tea and the medicinal herbs she kept in jars along her kitchen windowsill. Liam sat at Mrs. Chen's dining table, his sandy brown hair falling across his forehead, his serious dark eyes fixed on the paper in front of him. Around him, spread across every available inch of the table, were drawings, pianos. Dozens and dozens of pianos sketched in crayon and colored pencil, each one slightly different, but all unmistakably the same instrument. Some had hands hovering over the keys. Some had music notes floating up like bubbles. Some were surrounded by what looked like crowds of people, stick figures in triangular dresses and rectangular suits. Nathan's breath caught in his throat. How could Liam know? He drew all night, Mrs. Chen said softly. Wouldn't stop even to eat. Just kept making these. Liam looked up from his current drawing and met his father's eyes. The boy's expression was intense, searching, as if he was trying to communicate something crucial through sheer force of will. He couldn't speak, hadn't spoken since the day Lucas drowned, but Nathan had learned to read his son's face, like a book written in a language only they shared. Right now, Liam's face was asking a question. Daddy, what happened tonight? Nathan crossed the room and knelt beside his son's chair, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. Liam reached out and pressed a drawing into his father's hands. It showed two figures sitting at a piano. One was tall, with brown scribbly hair. The other was small, with orange scribbly hair and no eyes, just two X marks where eyes would be. A blind girl. Liam had drawn a blind girl at a piano. Nathan's hands shook as he held the paper. How had Liam known? Was it possible that somehow across the miles between the Grand Meridian Hotel and this small Brooklyn apartment, his son had felt what was happening? Liam pointed at the drawing, then at Nathan's hands, then pressed his own small palm against his chest over his heart. Their silent language developed over 4 years of therapy and patience and desperate love. Liam was saying, I felt it. The music. In my heart. Nathan pulled his son into a hug so tight that Liam squeaked in surprise. Yeah, buddy, Nathan whispered against his son's hair. Daddy played tonight. First time in a long time. Liam's small arms wrapped around Nathan's neck, holding on with fierce intensity. When they finally separated, the boy's serious eyes were bright with something that looked almost like hope. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat softly. I'll leave you too. She gathered her things and headed toward the door, then paused and looked back at Nathan. Whatever happened tonight, it's good. He's been different since around 9 o'clock. More present, like he was waiting for something. After she left, Nathan sat with Liam in the silent apartment. The drawing spread around them like evidence of a miracle neither of them fully understood. Time for bed, buddy, Nathan finally said. It's way past your bedtime. Liam nodded, but didn't move. Instead, he picked up another piece of paper and started drawing again. This time, the picture showed 3 figures. The tall one with brown hair, the small one with orange hair and X eyes, and another small one with brown hair, like the tall figure standing between them. Liam pointed at the middle figure, then at himself. Nathan's throat closed up. His son had drawn himself into the picture. Liam wanted to be part of whatever had happened tonight. We'll see, Buddy Nathan managed to say. We'll see. That night, after Liam finally fell asleep, with 3 of his piano drawings clutched against his chest, Nathan sat in the darkness of their small living room and stared at his hands. The hands that had played tonight, the hands that had made music for the first time in 4 years, the hands that had reached a terrified child when no one else could. He thought about the little girl, about her laugh, about the way she had said the music felt like butterflies made of sound. He thought about the woman in the red dress, about the crack in her Ice Queen armor, about the desperate gratitude in her eyes. And he thought about Lucas. I played our song, Nathan whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of his son that lived in every corner of his memory. I played it for another kid. I don't know if that's okay. I don't know if you'd be mad or happy or what. But she needed it. She needed it the way you used to need it. The silence that answered him felt for the first time in 4 years like something other than judgment. The next morning, Nathan's phone started buzzing before dawn. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was a scheduling notification from the building management company. But the buzzing continued, one notification after another, until he finally grabbed the phone from his nightstand and squinted at the screen. 23 text messages, 14 missed calls, 47 email notifications. Nathan's stomach dropped. The texts were from people he hadn't heard from in years. Old colleagues from the music world, former students, even his agent Marcus, who he had fired 3 years ago. Nate, is this you in the video? Call me immediately. Nathan, I just saw the viral clip. What happened? Where have you been? Mr. Cole, this is Sarah Jenkins from the New York Times Arts section. We'd love to interview you about your performance at the Ashford Gala. Please call at your earliest convenience. With shaking hands, Nathan opened his browser and searched for Ashford Technologies Gala Janitor Piano. The video had 2.3 million views. Someone had captured almost the entire performance on their phone from the moment Nathan dropped to his knees beside the screaming child to the final note of the lullaby. The video quality was shaky, the audio slightly distorted by the ballroom's acoustics, but none of that mattered. The comments section was exploding. Who is this man? That's not how janitors play piano. That lullaby made me sob at my desk. I don't even know why. Someone identify him. This is professional level musicianship. Nathan closed the browser and dropped his phone like it had burned him. His carefully built invisibility was shattering. 3 years of anonymity destroyed in 5 minutes of music. Across the city in a penthouse apartment that overlooked Central Park, Vivian Ashford was having a very similar morning. She had barely slept, kept awake by the memory of her daughter's transformation, by the echo of that lullaby, by the image of a janitor in a wrinkled uniform, bringing 300 powerful people to tears with nothing but his hands and an old piano. Mommy. Vivian turned from the window to find Rosie standing in the doorway of her bedroom. Strawberry blonde curls, wild from sleep, her unseeing eyes turned toward the sound of her mother's breathing. Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep okay? Rosie padded across the room and climbed onto Vivian's bed, a ritual she had stopped doing months ago but seemed to need today. When is the music man coming back? The music man, the man from last night. The one who played the butterfly song. When is he coming back? Vivian's heart clenched. Baby, he was just a worker at the event. He probably won't, but he has to come back. Rosie's voice was fierce in a way Vivian rarely heard from her usually quiet daughter. The music felt like golden butterflies landing on my skin, like someone was talking to me in a language I didn't know I understood. I want to feel that again. Vivian pulled her daughter close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, thinking about all the specialists and therapists and expensive programs she had tried over the past 7 years. None of them had reached Rosie the way that janitor had in 5 minutes with nothing but a piano and a lullaby. I'll see what I can find out, she promised. After Rosie went back to her room to get dressed, Vivian opened her laptop and started digging. As CEO of a technology company, she had resources that most people couldn't imagine. Within an hour, she had the janitor's personnel file pulled up on her screen. Nathan Cole, night shift custodian, employed for 3 years, address in Brooklyn, emergency contact listed as Mrs. May Chen neighbor. No prior work history listed, which was unusual for a man in his mid-30s. No educational background provided. Just a blank space where a life should be. But Vivian was very good at finding information people didn't want found. Another hour of searching through archived articles and digitized concert programs revealed the truth and it hit her like a physical blow. Nathan Cole, Juilliard graduate, winner of the Hartwell competition at age 22. Featured in Chamber Music Quarterly's Rising Stars issue. Scheduled to make his Carnegie Hall debut in September of 4 years ago. The Carnegie Hall performance had never happened. Vivienne found the article buried in a local paper from a small town in Connecticut. Tragedy strikes local family. Child drowns at lake house. The article was brief and clinical, describing an accidental drowning at a vacation property. A 5-year-old boy named Lucas Cole had died. His twin brother Liam had witnessed the incident. The father was described as a prominent classical pianist who had immediately cancelled all upcoming performances following the tragedy. There was no mention of Nathan Cole in any music-related publications after that date. He had simply vanished from the world he had spent his entire life building. Vivienne sat back in her chair, the weight of understanding settling over her. The janitor who had saved her daughter was a grieving father who had buried his gift along with his son. The lullaby that had reached Rosie when nothing else could have been written for children who were gone. And somehow, through some miracle, she didn't understand he had chosen to play it again for a stranger's child having the worst moment of her life. Vivienne needed to talk to him, not as a CEO summoning an employee, not as a powerful woman who always got what she wanted, as one broken parent to another. 3 days after the gala, Vivienne found Nathan in the corporate offices of Ashford Technologies at 10 o'clock at night. She had changed out of her usual power suits into designer jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in its usual severe twist. She still looked expensive, still looked like someone who belonged in boardrooms rather than service corridors. But she had wanted to seem more approachable, more human. Nathan was emptying a trash bin in one of the corner offices when she appeared in the doorway, and she watched him freeze the moment he noticed her presence. "Mrs. Ashford." His voice was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands tightened around the trash bag. "Is there a problem with my work? Can we talk?" Vivienne stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. "Not as employer to employee, just as two people. I don't think that's a good idea. Please." Her voice cracked slightly on the word, and she saw something flicker across his face. Something that looked like recognition. Not as someone ordering you, as one parent to another. Nathan stood very still for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Then he set down the trash bag and leaned against the desk, arms crossed over his chest. 5 minutes. Vivienne moved to the chair across from him, suddenly unsure how to begin the conversation she had rehearsed this a dozen times in her head. "Rosie hasn't stopped smiling since the gala," she finally said. "She's talked more in the past 3 days than she has in the past 3 months. I'm glad she's doing well. She keeps asking when the music man is coming back." Vivienne watched Nathan's jaw tighten at the words. "She calls you that? The music man. She says the music felt like golden butterflies." Nathan said nothing, but his knuckles had gone white where they gripped his own arms. "I know who you are," Vivienne continued quietly. "Nathan Cole, Juilliard graduate, rising star pianist. You were supposed to debut at Carnegie Hall 4 years ago." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You looked me up. I needed to understand how a janitor could play like that." Nathan's voice was flat. "And what did you find?" Vivienne hesitated. Then she decided that if she wanted honesty from him, she had to offer it first. "I found out that you had twin sons. That one of them died. That you disappeared from the music world completely after that." She paused. "I found out that you've been working here for 3 years, staying invisible. And I never knew that one of my custodial staff was once one of the most promising pianists in the country. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. "Why are you here, Mrs. Ashford?" "Vivienne, please." She took a breath. "I'm here because my ex-husband left when Rosie was 2. He called her defective, said he needed a normal child, had an affair, got his mistress pregnant. When I confronted him, he said Rosie was my incomplete mistake to deal with, that he deserved a child who could actually see him." Nathan's arms uncrossed. His expression shifted from guarded to something closer to understanding. "That's unforgivable. I turned ice cold after that. Built walls so high, nothing could get in. Threw myself into work because that was what I could control. But Rosie," her voice cracked, "I've been trying to fix her for 7 years instead of just hearing her. You showed me that in 5 minutes." The silence between them changed. It was still heavy, but now it was the weight of shared pain rather than defensive distance. "I had sons," Nathan said, finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Twins. Lucas and Liam." Vivienne caught the verb tense, had to. "Lucas died 4 years ago, drowned at our lake house. His throat worked as he swallowed. Liam, his twin, watched it happen. Hasn't spoken a single word since." "Oh, Nathan." Vivienne felt tears prick at her eyes. "I'm so sorry." Nathan's next words came out in a rush, like a dam breaking after years of pressure. "That lullaby I played. I wrote it for them, played it every night before bed. The last thing Lucas ever asked me was to play our song. He asked for it, and I said later. Later, buddy. Daddy's tired." His voice cracked. There was no later. He was gone before morning. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and terrible and true. "And you haven't played since," Vivienne whispered. "How could I? Every time I touched the piano I heard his voice. Every note reminded me of the promise I broke. I gave up everything. Music, my career, my marriage." His laugh was bitter. "My wife couldn't look at Liam without seeing Lucas. She moved to California 6 months after the funeral. I got full custody because she couldn't bear to take him. He's all I have left, and half the time I don't know if I'm helping him or hurting him by keeping him with me." "You're not hurting him." Vivienne's voice was firm. "You're his father." "I'm a janitor who used to be something." Nathan met her eyes. "That's all I am now. That's all I can afford to be." The vulnerability in his voice, the raw honesty of his pain, made Vivienne want to reach out and touch him. She didn't. Instead, she asked the question she had come here to ask. "Would you consider teaching Rosie piano?" Nathan's whole body went rigid. "No, please just think about it. She hasn't stopped talking about the music since the gala. I said no. His voice was sharp. Playing for her that night was instinct. Desperation. I didn't think about it. But teaching her week after week, showing up and playing and pretending everything is fine, that's different. That's choosing to go back to something I walked away from for a reason. You helped her once. I helped her once and it almost broke me." Nathan's hands were shaking now. "You didn't see me after. Didn't see me sitting in the service corridor, sobbing until I couldn't breathe. Didn't see me at home at 3 a.m, shaking, because I could still feel those keys under my fingers, and all I could think about was Lucas asking for the song I never played him." Vivienne stood very still, letting him speak, letting the pain pour out. "You want me to make another promise to another child?" Nathan continued, his voice cracking. "What happens when I fail her too? What happens when the memories get too heavy and I have to walk away and she's sitting at a piano wondering why she wasn't enough?" The question hung between them, brutal and honest. "She asked me something last night," Vivienne said quietly. Nathan froze. "She asked if maybe the music man didn't come back because she wasn't good enough. Because she's broken. Nathan's breath caught audibly. This morning I found her at the piano. Just sitting there. Hands on the keys, not playing. She said she was trying to remember how your song felt, because she's afraid she'll forget. Stop! Nathan's voice was ragged. She said the music made her feel like she wasn't alone in the dark anymore. Like she could feel the whole world through your song. And now she thinks. I said stop! Nathan's shout echoed off the office walls. The raw anguish in his voice made Vivian's heart crack. They stood in silence, both breathing hard, both fighting tears. Then Vivian said, very quietly, as if this is your later. Nathan's head snapped up. What if Rosie sitting at that piano, trying to remember your song, is the promise you can actually keep? Her voice was gentle, but unrelenting. You can't bring Lucas back. You can't go back and play him that lullaby. But you can show up for Rosie. You can be the person who doesn't leave her sitting in the dark, wondering if she mattered. Nathan stared at her, and something in his expression cracked wide open. You can keep this promise, Nathan. You can be on time. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Nathan's breathing was ragged, his entire body shaking with the effort of holding himself together. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. One lesson! I'll do one lesson. Vivienne's heart leaped. If I can't handle more after that, you tell Rosie it's not because of her. You tell her she's extraordinary, and this is about me, not her. Promise me. I promise. Nathan nodded once sharp and broken, like a man who had just agreed to walk through fire. He grabbed his cleaning supplies and headed for the door. At the threshold, he paused without looking back. She's not broken. Tell her the music man said she's not broken. She's just waiting for the world to catch up to how special she is. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the service corridor, leaving Vivian alone in the dark office, with tears streaming down her face, and something that felt dangerously like hope blooming in her chest. Nathan told Liam about the piano lessons that night, sitting on the edge of his son's bed, in the dim glow of the dinosaur nightlighter they had never gotten around to replacing. Daddy's going to teach a little girl to play piano, Nathan said, watching Liam's face carefully for any sign of distress. Like I used to teach before. A little girl who can't see. Liam's serious eyes went wide. He sat up in bed so fast that his stuffed triceratops tumbled to the floor, completely forgotten. Before Nathan could say anything else, Liam scrambled off the bed and grabbed his box of crayons and paper from the desk by the window. His small hands moved frantically, crayon flying across the page with an urgency Nathan had never seen before. When Liam finished, he thrust the drawing at his father with trembling hands. It showed a piano with 3 figures sitting at it. One tall figure with brown hair, one small figure with orange hair and X marks for eyes, and between them another small figure with brown hair, clearly meant to be Liam himself. Liam pointed at himself in the drawing, then at Nathan, then back at himself. His message was unmistakable. You want to come with me? Liam nodded so vigorously that Nathan worried he might hurt his neck. Nathan felt his heart crack open a little more. For 4 years, he had carefully protected Liam from anything related to music, worried that it would trigger memories of Lucas, of the lake house, of the brother they had lost. He had kept his son wrapped in silence, because he thought silence was safer. But looking at Liam now, at the desperate hope in his serious dark eyes, Nathan realized he might have been wrong. Maybe Liam didn't need protection from music. Maybe he needed it the same way he had needed it before Lucas died, the same way he had needed his father's lullabies and the sound of piano practice filtering through their apartment walls. Okay, buddy, Nathan heard himself say. You can come. The smile that broke across Liam's face was so bright, so sudden, so unexpected, that Nathan had to look away to hide his tears. That night, after Liam finally fell asleep, with his drawing clutched against his chest, Nathan dug through the closet in his bedroom where he kept the things he couldn't look at, but couldn't throw away. Boxes full of music books, stacks of handwritten compositions, concert programs from performances that felt like they had happened to someone else, someone Nathan barely remembered being. At the bottom of one box, he found it. The sheet music for the twins' lullaby, handwritten on staff paper, coffee-stained and wrinkled from years of handling. He had spilled coffee on it the morning he wrote it, rushed and excited, wanting to get the melody down before it disappeared from his head. Nathan sat on his bed and held the paper in his trembling hands, and the tears came before he could stop them. "I'm going to play this again," he whispered to the empty room, to the ghost of his son, to whoever might be listening. "I'm going to teach it to another child. I don't know if that's betraying you or honoring you. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm going to try." The silence that answered felt impossibly almost like permission. Across the city in her penthouse, Vivienne was making her own preparations. She had spent the day making phone calls and arranging deliveries, channeling her nervous energy into action, the way she always did when emotions threatened to overwhelm her. By evening, a beautiful upright piano had been installed in the living room of her penthouse, positioned near the windows, where natural light would warm the keys. It was a specific model that Vivienne had researched for hours, chosen for its warm tone and responsive touch, designed to produce strong vibrations that would travel through the bench and into the body of the player. Perfect for a child who experienced music through sensation rather than sound. She had also rearranged the living room to create a quiet corner, removing the glass coffee table that might be disorienting, adding soft textured rugs that Rosie could navigate, easily setting up tactile guides along the walls so her daughter could move independently through the space. "Mommy, why is there a piano?" Vivienne turned to find Rosie standing in the doorway, her cane in hand, her head tilted toward the new addition to their living room. "Come feel it." Vivienne guided Rosie to the piano, helping her small hands explore the smooth wood, the cool keys, the intricate pedals. "This is for you, for your lessons." Lessons. "The music man is coming on Saturday. He's going to teach you to play." Rosie's face transformed. The joy that spread across her features was so intense, so pure, that Vivienne felt tears spring to her eyes. "Really? He's really coming back. Really? And he's bringing his son too. A little boy named Liam. He's 6 years old. Does Liam like butterflies?" Vivienne laughed softly. "I don't know, sweetheart. You can ask him on Saturday." That night, Rosie couldn't sleep. She kept getting out of bed to touch the piano, to run her fingers over the keys, to feel the vibrations when she pressed a single note and let it ring out into the darkness. Vivienne found her there at midnight, sitting on the piano bench in her butterfly pajamas, her fingers resting on the keys without pressing them. "I'm trying to remember how his song felt," Rosie explained. "I'm afraid I'll forget before he comes back." Vivienne sat down on the bench beside her daughter and pulled her close. "You won't forget. And even if you do, he'll play it for you again. Promise, promise." In a small Brooklyn apartment, Nathan Cole lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind running through 1,000 scenarios of how Saturday might go wrong. Beside his bed, in a place of honor on his nightstand, sat the sheet music for the lullaby. And in the small bedroom next door, Liam Cole slept peacefully, for the first time in months, his dreams full of music and butterflies and the hope of something new. Nathan and Liam arrived at Vivienne's penthouse building 15 minutes early on Saturday afternoon. Both of them dressed more carefully than usual, both of them carrying their anxiety like visible weights. Nathan wore a simple button-down shirt and dark jeans, the nicest clothes he owned that weren't formal wear from another life. His hands hadn't stopped trembling since they left the apartment, and he kept clenching them into fists to hide the shaking. Liam walked beside him, his small hand gripping Nathan's with fierce intensity. The boy had dressed himself this morning in his favorite blue shirt and the corduroys that were only slightly too short, and he had combed his own hair without being asked. He carried a drawing in his free hand, one he had made that morning, though he wouldn't show Nathan what it was. The penthouse was on the 42nd floor, and the elevator ride felt like ascending into another world. Everything about the building screamed wealth, from the marble floors to the crystal fixtures to the uniformed doorman who had greeted them by name. Vivienne must have told him to expect them. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse foyer, and Nathan's breath caught at the space that spread out before them. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park, bathing everything in golden afternoon light. The furniture was modern and minimalist, expensive, without being ostentatious. But scattered throughout the space were unexpected touches that made Nathan's heart clench. Textured rugs in bright colors. Guide rails installed at child height along the walls. Every surface free of sharp edges or fragile objects that might be knocked over by someone navigating by touch. This was a home designed around a blind child's needs. Every detail spoke of a mother who was trying even if she wasn't always succeeding. Vivienne appeared from a doorway, and Nathan was struck again by how different she looked out of her CEO armor. Soft silk blouse instead of power suit, hair loose around her shoulders, bare feet with pink painted toenails. She looked almost vulnerable, almost human. "You're early," she said, but she was smiling. "I'm glad." Her eyes dropped to Liam, and Nathan watched surprise flicker across her face. He hadn't told her he was bringing his son. Hadn't been sure until the last minute that he could handle it himself. "This is my son Liam," Nathan said quietly. "He doesn't speak, but he wanted to come. Is that okay?" Vivienne's expression softened immediately. "Of course." Her voice was gentle as she addressed Liam directly. "Welcome to our home, Liam. Rosie has been so excited to meet you." Before Nathan could say anything else, before he could prepare himself or his son for what was coming, Rosie came racing around the corner. She moved with surprising confidence. For a blind child, one hand trailing the guide rail along the wall, the other holding her cane that tapped rapidly against the floor. Her strawberry blonde curls bounced wildly around her face, and she was wearing a purple dress with textured flower patterns that Nathan guessed she had picked out herself. "Is he here? Is the music man here?" "I'm here," Nathan said, and the joy that transformed Rosie's face nearly knocked him backward. She crashed into his legs with a hug that was so enthusiastic, so unguarded, that Nathan felt tears prick at his eyes. Her small arms wrapped around his waist, and she pressed her face against his stomach, breathing deeply. "You smell like lemons again," I remembered. Nathan couldn't help the laugh that escaped him. "That's the cleaning solution from work. I like it." Rosie pulled back, tilting her unseeing eyes up toward where she sensed his face. "It's how I know you're here. Lemon smell means music man." Then Rosie went very still, her head turning slightly, her whole body orienting toward something Nathan couldn't sense. "Someone else is here," she said. "Someone small." I can hear them breathing. Nathan looked down at Liam, who was pressed against his side. Eyes wide, staring at Rosie with an expression Nathan couldn't quite read. "This is my son Liam. He's 6 years old." Rosie's face lit up even brighter than before. She extended her hands carefully, reaching toward where she sensed Liam standing. "Can I feel your face? That's how I see people, with my fingers." Liam looked up at Nathan, uncertain. Nathan gave him a small nod of encouragement. Slowly, hesitantly, Liam stepped forward and stood still as Rosie's small fingers found his face. She traced his features with gentle precision, mapping the shape of his nose, his chin, the curve of his ears, the furrow between his brows. "Your eyes feel sad," she announced after a long moment. "But your heartbeat is going really fast, like you're excited." She tilted her head. "Do you like butterflies?" Liam didn't answer, couldn't answer, but his hand came up and caught Rosie's, holding her fingers against his cheek. "You don't talk," Rosie said. It wasn't a question. "That's okay. I like people who don't talk. It means when they do say something, it's really important." She pulled her hand free and grabbed Liam's wrist instead. "Come on, I'll show you my butterfly collection. They're not real butterflies, just pictures made of different textures. But they feel like real wings if you close your eyes." And then, without waiting for permission from any of the adults, Rosie led Liam away, her cane tapping, and his footsteps following, leaving Nathan and Vivienne standing in the foyer, staring after them. "Well," Vivienne said softly, "that's not how I expected this to go." Nathan felt something loosen in his chest. "Me neither." Vivienne gestured toward the living room. "Shall we?" The piano was beautiful. An upright model in warm walnut, positioned near the windows where the afternoon light made it glow. Nathan approached it slowly, his feet heavy, his heart pounding. This was it. The moment he had been dreading and anticipating for a week. He sat down on the bench and let his hands hover over the keys without touching them. The familiar position, the familiar posture felt like slipping into clothes he had outgrown years ago. "Take your time," Vivienne said from somewhere behind him. Nathan closed his eyes and let himself feel the piano's presence. The weight of the keys beneath his fingers. The resonance waiting to be released. The music trapped inside the wood and strings waiting for him to set it free. His finger pressed down on a single key. Middle C. The note rang out into the penthouse, clear and pure. Something unlocked inside Nathan's chest. By the time Rosie and Liam returned from the butterfly collection, Nathan had played through several scales and a few simple exercises, warming up his rusty fingers, remembering how this used to feel. Rosie practically ran to the piano bench, climbing up beside Nathan with the ease of someone who had already claimed the spot as her own. Teach me! Teach me!" Nathan laughed softly. Okay. Let's start with how the piano works." He took her small hand in his and placed it on the keys. There are 88 keys in total. Some are black, some are white. The white keys are the regular notes, and the black keys are the sharps and flats. Feel the pattern. Rosie's fingers explored carefully. 2 black, then 3 black, then 2 black again. It keeps repeating. Exactly. That pattern repeats all the way up and down the keyboard. Once you learn it, you can always find where you are. The next hour was unlike any teaching Nathan had ever done. He couldn't show Rosie what to do, visually couldn't demonstrate a technique and ask her to copy it. Instead, he had to use touch, sound, vibration, spatial awareness. He took her hand and placed it on his, letting her feel the movements of his fingers as he played. He pressed keys and asked her to identify them by sound. He explained musical concepts through sensation rather than sight. And Rosie absorbed it all like a sponge. She had perfect pitch, Nathan realized with shock about 20 minutes in. She could identify any note he played, could reproduce intervals accurately, could tell when something was even slightly out of tune. "That note sounds different," she said, when he deliberately played a key that was slightly flat. "You're right." Nathan adjusted his fingering. "How did you know?" "It tasted wrong. That note is supposed to taste like honey, but that one tasted like honey mixed with something sour." Her synesthetic descriptions delighted him. Notes had colors and textures and tastes in Rosie's world. The low notes rumbled like purple velvet. The high notes sparkled like golden rain. Chords bloomed like flowers made of sound. But the most remarkable thing happened without Nathan even noticing. Liam, who had been sitting silently in the corner, watching with intense focus, had moved closer as the lesson progressed. First to a chair near the piano, then to the floor beside the bench, then finally to the bench itself, squeezing onto the end beside Rosie. Nathan looked over and found his son's fingers resting on the keys, mimicking the positions Nathan had been teaching. "You want to try, buddy?" Liam nodded, his serious eyes bright with something Nathan hadn't seen in 4 years. "Hope." Nathan reached across Rosie and gently positioned Liam's hands on the keys, showing him the basic position he used to teach the twins when they were small. Liam watched Nathan's hands move through a simple scale, then repeated it with surprising accuracy. His son had his father's hands. The same long fingers, the same natural positioning, the same instinctive understanding of how to coax sound from an instrument. For a moment, Nathan was transported back 5 years to a sunlit living room in their old apartment. Lucas and Liam on his lap, fighting over who got to press which keys, their giggles filling the air with joy. The memory should have hurt. It did hurt, but it was also beautiful. "You're good at this," Rosie told Liam, though she couldn't see what he was doing. "I can feel the bench moving differently when you play. It's smoother than when I play." Liam looked at Rosie with something like wonder on his face. A girl who couldn't see him, but could feel his music. As the lesson neared its end, Rosie asked the question Nathan had been dreading. "Will you play the butterfly song? The one from the party?" Nathan's hands stilled on the keys. The lullaby. Lucas's lullaby. He had known this moment would come. Had been bracing himself for it all week. "Okay," he said softly. "Close your eyes and feel." His fingers found the opening notes, and the melody spilled into the room like sunlight. Through clouds. The lullaby he had written for his twins, the song Lucas had asked for on the last night of his life, the music that had been locked away for 4 years until a screaming child had set it free. Rosie sat perfectly still beside him, her whole body attuned to the vibrations traveling through the bench. On her other side, Liam's lips moved silently, almost like he wanted to hum along. When the final note faded, Nathan found that he was crying. Tears tracked down his face, and he didn't try to hide them. "That song is sad and beautiful at the same time," Rosie said quietly. "Like you're talking to someone who went away." Nathan's voice came out rough. "I am." "Do they answer?" Nathan thought about it. Really thought about it. For the first time in 4 years. Sometimes, in little ways. "That's good." Rosie leaned against his arm. "My daddy went away too. Not like dying, just leaving. I used to talk to him in my head, but he never answers. I think maybe he forgot how to listen." Nathan put his arm around her small shoulders, pulling her close. "Some people forget how to listen," he said. "But that's not your fault. It never could be." Rosie nodded against his side. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "Same time next week." Nathan looked at Vivienne, who stood in the doorway with tears on her face, watching the three of them at the piano, like she was witnessing something miraculous. He looked at Liam, whose eyes were pleading, whose silent presence was screaming, "Please, please, please." He looked at Rosie, whose unseeing eyes somehow saw straight through to the broken places in his heart. "Same time next week." The Saturday lessons became the center of Nathan's week in a way he hadn't expected. Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, he and Liam took the subway to Vivienne's penthouse. Every Saturday, Rosie was waiting at the door, bouncing with excitement, ready to show them what she had practiced during the week. Every Saturday, Nathan found himself laughing more than he had in years, found himself looking forward to something for the first time since Lucas died. Within 3 weeks, Rosie was playing simple melodies. Within 6 weeks, she had mastered basic chord progressions. Her progress was remarkable, driven by pure love of the music rather than any external pressure. But what surprised Nathan most was Liam. His son, who had retreated into silence after Lucas's death, was slowly coming back to life. At first, Liam just sat beside Rosie on the piano bench, watching and listening. Then his fingers started finding the keys on their own. Then Nathan started teaching both children together, watching them lean into each other as they played. They developed their own communication. Rosie talked and Liam listened. Rosie described what she felt and Liam nodded or shook his head or tapped her hand once for yes, twice for no. Rosie couldn't see Liam's face, but she claimed she could feel his emotions through his music. "You play sad today," she told him one Saturday. "Your notes are heavy. Do you want to talk about it?" Liam's eyes went wide. He looked at Nathan, then back at Rosie. Then, incredibly impossibly, he reached out and pressed 3 keys on the piano. Just 3 notes played in a simple pattern. "I don't talk," the notes seemed to say. "I just play." Rosie smiled. "Then play louder. I want to hear what you're feeling." And Liam did. What started as 1 hour stretched to 2, then 3. What started as piano lessons expanded to include dinner and then dessert, and then the children falling asleep on the couch while Nathan and Vivienne talked in quiet voices about everything and nothing. The dinners became the part Nathan looked forward to most, though he wouldn't admit it to himself. They would order takeout and eat it around the coffee table, the children chattering, or in Liam's case, communicating about school and books and the weird dreams they had. After the kids were in bed, Nathan and Vivienne would migrate to the balcony with glasses of wine, and the conversations would go deeper. Vivienne told him about building Ashford Technologies from nothing, about the investors who had laughed her out of meetings, about the sexism she faced daily in a male-dominated industry, about the triumph of proving everyone wrong and the loneliness that came with success. "Emotion made me vulnerable," she said. One night her voice soft in the darkness. "Control made me untouchable. But sometimes I wonder if I went too far. If I built the walls so high, I forgot what they were supposed to protect." Nathan understood that perfectly. He found himself sharing stories about Lucas that he hadn't spoken aloud in years. The way Lucas used to conduct imaginary orchestras with a wooden spoon. How he insisted on hearing the lullaby 3 times in a row because it sounds different each time, Daddy. The way both twins would fall asleep with their heads on Nathan's chest, their small bodies warm and trusting. He talked about Liam too, about the guilt he felt every day, wondering if he was helping his son heal or just allowing him to hide. About the fear that kept him awake at night, that Liam would never speak again, would never fully come back from the trauma of watching his brother die. Vivienne listened without trying to fix anything. She just sat beside him in the darkness, their shoulders almost touching, and let him speak. It was the most understood Nathan had felt since Sarah left. 8 weeks after the first lesson, Nathan walked toward on Vivienne's penthouse for a Saturday session and found himself humming. The realization stopped him mid-step on the sidewalk, his heart suddenly racing. He was humming. He hadn't hummed in 4 years. hadn't let music exist in his head, outside of the piano, outside of the careful, controlled space where he allowed it to live. But here he was, humming the tune that Rosie had been learning this week, the simple melody that she had picked up so quickly. The walls he had built around his heart were cracking, and the most terrifying part was that he didn't want to repair them. That night, after a lesson that had stretched into dinner, and then into dessert, and then into the children falling asleep in a tangle of limbs on the living room rug, Vivian walked Nathan to the door. It was 11 o'clock. The penthouse was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the children breathing. Same time next week, Vivian asked the same question Rosie always asked at the end of lessons. Same time next week. Nathan smiled. Neither of them moved. The air between them felt charged heavy with something neither was quite ready to name. Nathan was acutely aware of how close she was standing, of the scent of her perfume, of the way the low light caught the gold in her hair. Vivienne looked up at him, and Nathan saw something vulnerable in her eyes. Something that mirrored what he was feeling. Nathan, she started. He leaned toward her. Just slightly. Just enough to close some of the distance between them. Vivienne's breath caught. Her hand came up, almost touching his face. The music man forgot his jacket. Rosie's voice, sleepy but loud, shattered the moment like a stone through glass. They jumped apart. Nathan grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. His face flushed, his heart pounding. Good night, Vivienne. Good night, Nathan. He fled before he could do something stupid. Something wonderful. Something that would change everything. The walk home felt longer than usual. Nathan carried sleeping Liam on his shoulder, the boy's warm weight grounding him in reality. What are you doing? He asked himself. She's a billionaire. You clean toilets. She's Rosie's mother. You're Rosie's teacher. You're still broken. You'll only hurt her. But his heart wasn't listening to reason. Vivienne leaned against her closed door after Nathan left, her heart racing, her thoughts spinning. She hadn't felt like this in years. Not since before Jonathan, before the betrayal, before she had turned her heart to ice and sworn she would never be vulnerable again. But Nathan made her feel things. Real things. Terrifying things. She thought about the way he looked when he played lost in the music, all his walls down. She thought about the way he talked about Lucas, the love that still lived in every word. She thought about the way he was with Rosie, patient and kind and endlessly encouraging. She thought about the moment at the door, about how close they had been, about how badly she had wanted to close that final distance. What are you doing? She asked herself. He's your daughter's piano teacher. He works for your company. He's still grieving. You're still broken. You'll only hurt him. But her heart wasn't listening to reason either. 3 days later, the anniversary of Lucas's death arrived. Nathan knew it was coming. He had been dreading it for weeks, watching the date approach on the calendar like a storm on the horizon. He texted Vivienne that morning, just 2 words, can't come. She didn't ask why. She just wrote back, okay, here if you need anything. Nathan sent Liam to Mrs. Chen's apartment for the day. He needed to fall apart alone. Needed to let the grief have him, without worrying about how it would affect his son. He sat in his dark apartment with a bottle of whiskey he didn't drink and a box of Lucas's things he couldn't stop touching. A tiny shoe, a lock of hair. The last drawing Lucas ever made scribbles that was supposed to be a piano. The tears came and wouldn't stop. 4 years and the wound was still fresh. 4 years and he still expected to hear Lucas's voice, still turned to share something with a son who wasn't there, still felt the phantom weight of a small body in his arms. He didn't hear the knock at first, or the second. By the third, he finally registered the sound and dragged himself to the door. Vivienne stood in the hallway, dressed simply, in jeans and a sweater, holding a paper bag that smelled like coffee. How did you find me? Your emergency contact is your neighbor. She's worried about you, and so am I. Nathan should have told her to leave, should have preserved the boundaries that kept him safe. Instead, he stepped aside and let her in. She didn't try to comfort him with words, didn't offer platitudes about time healing all wounds or Lucas being in a better place. She just sat down on his worn couch and waited. Today's the day, Nathan finally said, his voice hoarse from crying. 4 years ago, today. Vivienne reached over and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and certain against his. Tell me about him. Nathan's first instinct was to refuse. He had spent 4 years not talking about Lucas, not letting anyone in, protecting his grief like a treasure he couldn't bear to share. But something about Vivienne's presence, about her quiet patience, made the words start flowing. He told her about the day the twins were born, how Lucas came first and Liam followed 4 minutes later. About how Lucas was the louder one, the more adventurous one, while Liam was quiet and watchful, even as a baby. About how they developed their own twin language that no one else could understand, a secret code of sounds and gestures. He told her about their lake house, about the 30 seconds that changed everything, about the sound of Liam screaming that Nathan would hear in his nightmares for the rest of his life. I was inside playing piano, Nathan said, his voice cracking, practicing some stupid piece for some stupid concert. Sarah called me to help with lunch. I was annoyed at the interruption. I actually remember being annoyed that I had to stop playing. Nathan, 30 seconds. I left them alone for 30 seconds. And when I came back outside, Lucas was floating in the water. Vivienne's grip on his hand tightened. The last thing he asked me, Nathan continued, his body shaking with sobs. The last thing he ever asked. He wanted me to play the lullaby, our song. And I said later. Later, buddy. Daddy's tired. There was no later. He collapsed into himself, the grief finally breaking free of the walls he had built around it. And Vivienne held him through it, her arms around his shaking body, her voice murmuring words he couldn't hear but could feel. They stayed like that for hours. Nathan cried until he couldn't cry anymore, until he was emptied out and hollowed and somehow lighter than he had felt in 4 years. You've been carrying this alone, Vivienne said, when the worst had passed. Her voice was thick with her own tears. No wonder you're exhausted. I don't deserve help. I let my son die. You made a mistake, a terrible human mistake, but you didn't let him die. You weren't a bad father or a careless father. You were a human being who looked away for 30 seconds. That's not a crime. That's just life being unbearably cruel. Nathan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something he hadn't expected. She wasn't looking at him with pity. She was looking at him with understanding, with recognition, with something that looked dangerously close to love. Lucas is gone, Vivienne said softly. You can't bring him back. But Liam is still here. Rosie is still here. I'm still here. Her hand came up to touch his face. What if choosing to live doesn't mean betraying Lucas? What if it means honoring him? Nathan closed his eyes and let her words wash over him. For the first time in 4 years, they didn't feel like a lie. The weeks following the anniversary felt different. Something had shifted between Nathan and Vivienne, something they both felt, but neither had named. Their hands lingered when they passed each other. Their eyes met and held across the room. The air between them hummed with possibility. The lessons continued, but now they felt like family time. Rosie's playing grew more sophisticated every week, her natural talent blooming under Nathan's patient guidance. Liam sat beside her at every lesson, his own skills developing alongside hers, his silence slowly becoming less absolute. One afternoon in late November, Liam played a simple melody that Nathan recognized immediately. the opening notes of the lullaby the twins' song, the music that had been forbidden for 4 years. Nathan's hands froze over the keys. Liam was playing Lucas's song. Liam was playing the music that connected them to the brother they had lost. And he was playing it beautifully. That's pretty, Rosie said, her head tilted toward the sound. What song is that? Liam looked at Nathan, his serious eyes asking permission. It's a song I wrote, Nathan said softly, his voice thick with emotion. For my sons. When they were babies. The twins, Rosie said. Liam and the one who went away. Nathan nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Yes. Will you teach it to me? The question should have hurt. A year ago, it would have destroyed him. But sitting here with Rosie's hopeful face and Liam's watchful eyes, Nathan realized something had changed inside him. The lullaby wasn't a wound anymore. It was a bridge. A connection between what he had lost and what he was building. Yes, Nathan said, I'll teach you. And he did. But the peace couldn't last. It never did. 3 weeks before Christmas, a man appeared at Vivienne's penthouse unannounced. Tall, conventionally handsome, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly rent. He had dark hair, shot through with silver, and eyes that were cold and calculating despite his polished smile. Nathan knew immediately who he was. Jonathan Reynolds, Vivienne's ex-husband, Rosie's biological father. I want to see my daughter. The words hit the room like a bomb. Rosie, who had been at the piano practicing, went rigid. Nathan felt his hands clench into fists at his sides. Vivienne positioned herself between Jonathan and the rest of the room like a shield. You gave up parental rights, Vivienne said, her voice cold as ice. You have no claim here. Jonathan's smile didn't waver. I've been speaking with my lawyers. Rights can be revisited, especially when there are concerns about the child's environment. What concerns? Jonathan's eyes swept the room, landing on Nathan with obvious disdain. I've been keeping tabs on things. The billionaire CEO inviting the building's janitor into her home, letting him around her vulnerable daughter. His tone dripped with contempt. It paints quite a picture. Nathan felt his blood turn to ice. Get out. Vivienne's voice was quiet and deadly. I don't think I will. Jonathan took a step further into the penthouse. See? I've been watching that viral video from the gala. The one with our daughter playing piano. The one that's racked up 10 million views. He turned to look at Rosie, who had pressed herself against Nathan's side, trembling. She's quite the prodigy, isn't she? Must be my genes. Nathan's voice came out rough. You need to leave. Jonathan laughed. Or what? You'll hit me, please. Give my lawyer something else to work with. The two men stared at each other across the room, the tension thick enough to cut. She's extraordinary, Nathan said quietly. Rosie is talented and kind and brave. Things you clearly can't recognize because you're too small to see them. She's my daughter. Jonathan's polished facade cracked slightly. She's her mother's daughter. You're just a biological footnote who ran when things got real. Jonathan's face twisted with ugly rage. You don't know anything about me. I know you called your daughter defective. Nathan stepped forward, placing himself fully between Jonathan and Rosie. I know you left when she was 2 years old because you wanted a normal child. I know you had an affair and got your mistress pregnant because you couldn't handle having a daughter who was different. That's enough. Jonathan's voice had gone cold. I have lawyers. I can make life very difficult for everyone in this room. He turned to Vivienne. I'll be in touch. Enjoy your janitor while you can. Then he walked out, leaving devastation in his wake. Rosie's trembling had turned to full body shaking. Is he going to take me away? Her voice was small, terrified. I don't want to go with him. He doesn't even like me. Nathan knelt down, taking her hands in his. No one is taking you anywhere. You belong here. You belong with your mom. But what if his lawyers? Nathan pulled her into a hug, feeling her tears soak into his shirt. He felt Liam press against his side, the boy's small hand finding Rosie's shoulder. Two children who couldn't fully communicate through words, holding each other in the face of a threat neither of them fully understood. Above their heads, Nathan met Vivian's eyes. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched, but her eyes held something fierce and determined. "We'll figure this out," she said. "He's not going to win." Nathan nodded, but his stomach was twisted with fear. Jonathan was right about one thing. How would it look to a judge? A billionaire CEO letting the building janitor into her home around her vulnerable daughter. Nathan was the weak point, the angle of attack, and he didn't know how to protect the people he loved from himself. The next few weeks were a siege. Jonathan's lawyers sent letters. His PR team planted stories in gossip magazines. Whispers circulated through Vivian's board of directors, concerns about judgment and appropriate relationships, and what kind of example the CEO was setting. Vivian fought back with her own lawyers, her own PR team, her own ferocious determination. She had documentation of Jonathan signing away parental rights. She had records of his affair, his abandonment, his complete absence from Rosie's life for 5 years. But the damage was being done. One evening, Nathan arrived at the penthouse to find Vivian on the phone with someone from her board. Her voice drifted through the partially open door of her home office. "Of course, I understand the optics. I'll be more careful about personal entanglements." Nathan felt the words like a knife to the chest. Personal entanglements. That's what he was to her board. An entanglement, a complication, a liability. He turned to leave before she could see him, but Vivian's voice stopped him. "Nathan, wait." He froze his hand on the doorframe. "I heard you on the phone," he said, without turning around. "I get it. I'm a liability." "That's not..." "It's okay, Vivian." He finally turned to face her, and the pain in his expression made her breath catch. "You built something amazing. I'm not going to be the reason it falls apart." "Nathan, please, maybe we should just keep this professional. For Rosie's sake, for everyone's sake." He left before she could respond, before she could see the tears burning in his eyes. The next week was agony. Nathan cancelled lessons, claiming illness. He avoided Vivian's calls and texts. He threw himself into work, taking extra shifts, exhausting himself so he wouldn't have to think. Liam stopped drawing pianos. Instead, his pictures were filled with storms and dark clouds and rain. Mrs. Chen watched Nathan with worried eyes, but didn't pry. She just made sure there was always hot tea waiting when he came home from work, and she kept Liam fed and cared for during the long hours Nathan was trying to disappear into manual labor. At the penthouse, Rosie was devastated. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked Vivian every day. "Is the music man mad at me?" Vivian held her daughter and tried to find words that would comfort without lying. "Nathan is going through something hard. It's not about you." But she wasn't sure she believed it herself. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have anticipated, was that Liam was about to change everything. One evening, a week into the separation, Nathan sat in his dark apartment after Liam had gone to bed. He was staring at nothing, lost in the familiar numbness that had been his companion for years. A small hand tugged at his sleeve. Liam stood beside the couch, a piece of paper clutched in his hands. His serious eyes were bright with something Nathan couldn't read. "Hey buddy, what's wrong?" Liam thrust the paper at his father. It was a drawing. 4 stick figures connected by lines that formed a heart around all of them. Nathan, Liam, Vivian, Rosie, a family. Nathan's throat closed up. "Buddy," And then Liam opened his mouth. Dead. The word came out rusty hoarse like a door that hadn't been opened in years. But it was unmistakably a word. Unmistakably, his son's voice. Nathan's world stopped spinning. Don't! Liam's face scrunched with effort. Stop! 2 more words. 3 total. After 4 years of absolute silence. Nathan grabbed his son and pulled him into his arms, his body shaking with sobs. Liam had spoken. Liam had broken through 4 years of trauma to tell his father something so important, he had to use his voice. Don't stop. Don't give up. Don't walk away from the family they were building. I hear you, Nathan whispered against his son's hair. I hear you, buddy. I'm not giving up. I promise. Liam's small arms wrapped around Nathan's neck and held on tight. Nathan showed up at Vivienne's penthouse the next morning without calling ahead. He wore his good shirt, the one he'd bought for lessons, when he realized he couldn't keep showing up in janitor uniforms. His hair was combed, his jaw was clean shaven for the first time in days, and Liam was beside him, holding his hand, his small face set with determination. Vivienne opened the door, and her expression cycled through surprise, relief, confusion, and hope in the span of 3 seconds. Nathan, I thought. He spoke. What? Liam spoke. Nathan's voice cracked on the words. Last night. 3 words. First time in 4 years. Vivienne's hand flew to her mouth. He told me not to give up. Nathan met her eyes, and everything he felt was written plainly on his face. So I'm not giving up. On any of it. Liam tugged at Nathan's hand and held up the drawing he had made. The 4 stick figures inside a heart. Vivienne knelt down to Liam's level. You made this. Liam nodded. It's beautiful. Her voice was thick with tears. Do you know what I think? You're absolutely right. She looked up at Nathan. He's right, she said. We're not giving up. Not on us. Not on this family. Jonathan can send all the lawyers he wants. The board can complain about optics until they're blue in the face. I don't care anymore. She stood and reached for Nathan's hand. I've spent my whole life controlling everything, keeping people at a distance, protecting myself from getting hurt. But you made me realize something. What? Some things are worth the risk. The morning of Vivienne's board meeting was cold and clear, the kind of December day that sparkled with promise. She dressed carefully, choosing her most powerful suit, her most expensive jewelry. Today, she would face her board and tell them exactly how things were going to be. Nathan had offered to stay home to make himself invisible the way he used to. She had refused. No more hiding, she told him. No more pretending. They accept us as we are, or they can find another CEO. The meeting was brutal. Board members voiced concerns about her judgment, about the company's image, about what kind of example she was setting for shareholders. One particularly aggressive member suggested she was letting her personal life interfere with her professional responsibilities. Vivienne listened to all of it with her Ice Queen mask firmly in place. Then she spoke. I've spent 10 years building this company from nothing into a billion-dollar enterprise. I've done that while raising a blind daughter alone, while fighting every form of discrimination this industry throws at women, while being told repeatedly that I couldn't succeed. She looked around the table at faces that ranged from hostile to sympathetic. I've also spent those years protecting myself, building walls, keeping everyone at a distance, because I was afraid of being hurt again. And you know what I learned? She paused, letting the silence stretch. Walls don't protect you. They just keep out the good things, along with the bad. Nathan Cole is the best thing that's happened to my daughter. He's also the best thing that's happened to me. If this board has a problem with who I choose to love, that's a board problem, not a Vivienne problem. She stood. I'll make this simple. I'm not hiding my relationship. I'm not apologizing for my choices, and I'm not going anywhere. If any of you have a problem with that, feel free to vote me out. But remember who built everything you're sitting in the middle of. She walked out before anyone could respond. 2 hours later, the board vote came in unanimously in her favor. Vivienne called Nathan with the news, and when he picked up, she could hear Rosie and Liam in the background, arguing about whether mermaids or dragons were cooler. It's over, Vivienne said. The board backed down. What about Jonathan? Still a threat, but a smaller one. My lawyers are confident we can shut him down, especially now that he's lost his board of directors' allies. And us, Vivienne smiled, though he couldn't see it. I told them I'm in love with you. Out loud. In front of everyone. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched for 3 heartbeats. You love me, Vivienne laughed, surprising herself. I think I've loved you since you played that lullaby for my daughter. I've just been too scared to say it. More silence. Then Nathan's voice, rough with emotion. I love you too. I've loved you since the night you sat in a hallway outside my door because you wouldn't let me be alone. When Nathan arrived at the penthouse that evening, Vivienne met him at the door. They stood there for a moment, looking at each other. All the words they had said and hadn't said, filling the space between them. Then Nathan crossed the threshold and kissed her. It was everything he had been holding back for months. All the wanting, all the fear, all the desperate hope that he could have something good again after losing so much. Vivienne melted into him, her arms around his neck, her body pressed against his like she was afraid he would disappear if she let go. Gross Rosie's voice came from somewhere behind them. Are you guys kissing? That's so gross. Nathan pulled back laughing and looked over Vivienne's shoulder to where Rosie and Liam stood in the living room doorway. Liam had a small smile on his face, the first smile Nathan had seen from his son in weeks. Does this mean the music man is staying forever? Rosie asked. Nathan looked at Vivienne, then at the 2 children who had somehow become his whole world. Yeah, he said softly. I think it does. 1 year to the day after Nathan walked into a ballroom and played a lullaby that changed everything. He stood backstage at the Ashford Technologies annual charity gala and tried to remember how to breathe. This time, he hadn't come through the service entrance. This time, he wore a suit instead of a janitor's uniform. This time, Vivienne had asked him to perform with Rosie a duet that would showcase how far they had both come. But none of that made his hands stop shaking. The music man is nervous, Rosie announced from beside him. I can hear your heartbeat from here. It sounds like horses running. Nathan laughed despite himself. You can hear my heartbeat. No, silly, but I can feel you vibrating. You're all tense and buzzy. She reached up and found his hand, threading her small fingers through his. Don't worry. We practiced 1,000,000 times. And even if we mess up, you always say that music isn't about being perfect. She was 8 now, taller than she had been a year ago. Her strawberry blonde curls tamed into 2 neat braids for the occasion. Her dress was purple, covered in textured flower patterns she had helped pick out. You're right, Nathan said, squeezing her hand. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about feeling Rosie finished. And sometimes you have to play through the fear to find the beautiful parts. Liam appeared on Nathan's other side, dressed in his own small suit, his serious face determined. He reached up and tugged on Nathan's sleeve. We're all here, he said quietly. His voice was still rusty from years of disuse, but he was using it more now. Short sentences, important words. Yeah, buddy. Nathan put his arms around both children, drawing them close. We're all here. From somewhere in the ballroom, the MC's voice announced them. And now, in what has become the most anticipated performance of our annual gala, please welcome back to the stage Rosie Ashford and her teacher, Nathan Cole. The applause started before they even walked out. The ballroom looked the same as Nathan remembered. Crystal chandeliers, expensive gowns, the same platform with the same grand piano. But everything else was different. The crowd wasn't looking at him with confusion or suspicion. They were looking with anticipation, with respect, with genuine excitement. Nathan helped Rosie to the piano bench and settled beside her. His hands found the keys, muscle memory taking over. Before they began, Rosie leaned toward the microphone they had set up at her request. "Hello, everyone." Her voice was clear and confident. "My name is Rosie Ashford, and this is my teacher Nathan." The room went silent, listening. "A year ago, I had the scariest moment of my life in this room. The world got too loud and too big, and I fell apart in front of everyone. I couldn't stop screaming, and I thought I was broken forever." Nathan felt tears prick at his eyes. Then Nathan played me a song, and for 5 minutes, I wasn't scared anymore. The music made me feel like I could see, even though I'm blind. Like I could fly, even though I was sitting still. Like I wasn't alone, even though I was in a room full of strangers. She turned her unseeing eyes towards where she sensed Nathan sitting. "He taught me that music isn't about being perfect. It's about having something to say. And tonight we're going to play the song that saved me." She faced the audience again. "This is for everyone who's ever been scared and needed someone to show them it's okay." Nathan's hands came down on the keys, and the lullaby filled the ballroom. It was the same melody he had played a year ago, but it had transformed in the months since then. The harmonies had expanded. The emotion had deepened. And now, instead of a solo piece, it was a conversation. Nathan played the main theme, and Rosie wove in harmonies he had taught her. Their hands moved together, 4 hands and 88 keys, creating something neither could make alone. She made mistakes, a wrong note here, a stumbled rhythm there. But she kept going just like he had taught her, playing through the imperfection to find the beauty underneath. The audience was mesmerized. Nathan could feel them leaning forward, drawn into the music, transported by the raw emotion flowing from the piano. He thought about Lucas as he played, about the son he had lost and the promise he had broken, about how the lullaby had been a wound for 4 years, a reminder of everything that went wrong. But now, sitting beside Rosie, with Liam watching from the front row next to Vivian, the lullaby had become something else. A bridge, a connection between his past and his present, between his grief and his hope, between the family he had lost and the family he had found. The final notes rang out into the silence, and for a moment, nobody moved. Then the applause exploded. A standing ovation, thunderous and genuine, for a blind girl and her teacher and the music they had made together. Rosie turned toward Nathan with the biggest smile he had ever seen. "We did it! You did it," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "You were perfect." "I made mistakes. Perfect anyway." He looked over her head and found Vivian in the crowd. Tears streamed down her face, and she was smiling so bright it almost hurt to look at. Beside her, Liam was crying too. But he was also humming along with the melody, his lips moving his whole body, swaying with music that had been locked away for 4 years and was finally free. Later that evening, when the gala had wound down and the important guests had said their goodbyes, Nathan found Vivian on the same balcony where they had stood a year ago. She had changed out of her formal gown into something simpler, and her feet were bare against the cold stone. The city stretched out below them, lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "Rosie was extraordinary tonight," Vivian said, without turning. "She's been asking us to use her nickname," Nathan said. Vivian laughed softly. "She was extraordinary tonight. Because of you. Because of all of us." He moved to stand beside her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders touched. 1 year, Vivian said. It's been exactly 1 year since you walked into that ballroom and changed everything. Nathan nodded. I've been thinking about that all day. About who I was 12 months ago. About who I am now. And he turned to face her, taking her hands in his. A year ago, I was a ghost. I was hiding from my own life, punishing myself for something I couldn't change. I thought I deserved to be invisible. Thought I didn't deserve music or love or happiness ever again. Vivienne's grip on his hands tightened. You made me believe I deserved more. Nathan continued. You and Rosie, and the way you both refused to give up on me, even when I was trying so hard to give up on myself. Nathan, I love you, Vivienne. The words hung in the air, simple and true. I love you. And I'm terrified, and I have no idea what I'm doing. But I can't pretend anymore that you're just Rosie's mother. Or just my friend. Or just... Vivienne kissed him before he could finish. The kiss was different from their first. That one had been desperate, urgent, full of relief. This one was soft, certain, a promise. When they finally pulled apart, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. Is this really happening? He whispered. Vivienne laughed, a sound that warmed him down to his bones. I think it's been happening for a while. We were just too scared to see it. What happens now? Whatever we want. Together. They stood there under the stars, holding each other. And for the first time in 5 years, Nathan let himself believe that the future could be something beautiful. The months that followed were the happiest of Nathan's life. He moved into Vivienne's brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, a beautiful 4-story home with a garden and a music room and enough space for all of them to grow. Liam got his own room decorated with his drawings and the paintings he had started creating in art therapy. Rosie got a music studio, soundproofed and perfect for practice. Nathan started a non-profit music therapy program for children with disabilities, funded initially by Vivienne, but growing quickly on its own merits. He worked with kids who couldn't communicate through words, kids who had experienced trauma, kids who needed a language that went beyond speaking. It turned out he was extraordinarily good at it. Liam's words came more often now. Still quiet, still careful, but real. He spoke to Nathan, to Vivienne, to Rosie. He spoke to his therapist and eventually to some kids at school. His first full sentence came 3 months after Nathan and Vivienne got together. Rosie played the wrong note. He said it matter-of-factly during a lesson, and Rosie had shrieked with delight. I did not, she protested. You did. It was supposed to be an F sharp. Nathan had laughed until he cried. In May, on a perfect spring afternoon, Nathan proposed. He did it simply, without the grand gestures some people might have expected from a romance this dramatic. He played Vivienne a new piece. He had composed a song called After the Storm that captured everything they had been through together. When the final note faded, he turned to find her crying. So he said, his heart pounding, Will you marry me? Vivienne threw her arms around his neck and kissed him until neither of them could breathe. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small and intimate, held in their Brooklyn garden with only the people who mattered most. Rosie was the flower girl walking down the aisle by following the string quartet's melody, her face radiant with joy. Liam carried the rings, his expression serious and proud. Halfway down the aisle he stopped and turned to face the small crowd. Don't drop them, he announced clearly. These are important. Everyone laughed through their tears. The vows were simple. You taught me that letting people in isn't weakness. Vivienne said, her voice steady, despite the tears streaming down her face. It's the bravest thing I've ever done. I love you, Nathan Cole. You taught me that moving forward doesn't mean leaving the past behind, Nathan replied. It means carrying it with you while making room for more. I love you too, Vivienne Ashford. They kissed while their children cheered And somewhere in the back of Nathan's mind, he felt Lucas's presence, like a warm breeze. "I think he's happy for us," Nathan whispered to Vivian that night, after the reception had wound down and the children were asleep. "Lucas." Nathan nodded. "I used to feel him like a weight, like something pressing down on me, reminding me of what I'd done wrong. But now he feels different, lighter." Vivienne squeezed his hand. "Maybe he was always trying to tell you it was okay. Maybe you just weren't ready to hear it." Nathan thought about that for a long moment. "Yeah," he said finally. "Maybe you're right." 11 years after a janitor walked into a ballroom and played a lullaby that changed everything. Nathan Cole stood in a dormitory hallway at Juilliard and tried not to cry. Rosie was 18 now, accepted to one of the most prestigious music conservatories in the world. She had become everything Nathan had seen in her from the beginning: talented, determined, fierce. A prodigy, the critics called her. A once-in-a-generation talent. But Nathan knew the truth. She was just a girl who had found her voice through music, who had refused to let her blindness define her, who had played through the fear to find the beautiful parts. Her dorm room was small and Spartan standard issue for incoming students. But Rosie moved through it with her cane mapping the space, already making it her own. "Bed by the window," she said. "I can feel the sun. Music stand here, sound system there." Vivienne was trying so hard not to cry that she had gone completely silent. Nathan reached over and squeezed her hand. "Mom," Rosie said, turning toward where she sensed her mother standing. "I can hear you not crying. It's okay. You can let it out." Vivienne laughed through her tears and pulled Rosie into a hug so tight that the girl squeaked. "I'm so proud of you," Vivienne whispered. "So incredibly proud. You're going to be amazing." "I'm going to make mistakes," Rosie said. "Good, that means you're trying." They spent the next 2 hours unpacking and arranging, and then there was nothing left to do. It was time to say goodbye. Vivienne went first, holding Rosie close and whispering promises to call every day, to visit every weekend she could, to always be there no matter how far apart they were. Then it was Nathan's turn. He looked at this young woman who had somehow become his daughter, who had saved him by letting him save her. And he felt his heart crack open with love and pride and the bittersweet ache of letting go. "You remember what I told you at that first lesson? 11 years ago," Rosie smiled. "Music isn't about being perfect. It's about feeling. And sometimes you have to play through the fear to find the beautiful parts." Nathan pulled her into a hug. "Exactly. Thank you," Rosie whispered against his shoulder. "For playing that song. For not giving up on music. For being my dad." The word hit Nathan like a physical blow. Dad. She had been calling him that for years now, but it still made his breath catch every time. "Thank you," he whispered back. "For giving me a reason to play again." Liam appeared beside them, 17 years old, now tall and quiet and talented in his own right. His paintings hung in galleries full of color and light. He always signed them with 2 interlocking circles, for him and Lucas twins forever connected. "You're my best friend," Liam said to Rosie. He hugged her carefully, the way he did everything. "You taught me it's okay to be different." Rosie touched his face, feeling his smile. "We're not different," she said. "We're just us." They drove home in near silence. Nathan and Vivienne holding hands across the center console. The brownstone felt too big and too quiet when they arrived, but it was also full of possibility. So Vivienne said, as they stood in the kitchen, surveying the empty spaces where Rosie's things used to clutter every surface. "What do we do now?" Nathan smiled and pulled her close. "Whatever we want," he said, "together." That night, Nathan sat at the piano in their music room and played the lullaby one more time. It sounded different now. Not sad anymore, not weighted with grief. Just beautiful the way music was supposed to be. Vivienne sat beside him, her head on his shoulder, and they let the melody wash over them. Lucas would be proud, Vivienne said softly, of who you've become, of the family we've built. Nathan's fingers stilled on the keys. I think he is. Behind them, on the wall of the music room, hung a gallery of photographs. Nathan and Vivienne's wedding, Rosie's first recital, Liam's first gallery show. 4 people smiling whole. And tucked among them, in a simple frame, was a child's drawing of a piano. Scribbles that were supposed to be music notes floating up toward the sky. Lucas's last drawing, the last thing he ever made, given a place of honor in the home his father had built from the pieces of his grief. For Daddy Nathan had written below it in his own hand, always loved, never forgotten. He had played a lullaby for a stranger's daughter 5 years after burying his own son. That single act of kindness had cracked open his frozen heart and let the light come pouring back in. Now, sitting in his music room with the love of his life, beside him and his children thriving, Nathan finally understood what his grandmother had tried to tell him when she first taught him to play on that out-of-tune piano in Queens. Music is a gift, not for keeping but for giving. The more you share it, the more it grows. He had given his music away when he had nothing left, and it had given him everything in return. That was the miracle of that night in the ballroom. Not that he had calmed a screaming child, or impressed a room full of strangers, or found love in the most unexpected place. The miracle was that he had finally stopped running from his gift and started using it again. And in doing so, he had found his way home. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button and join our channel family, where every story lifts the spirit and reminds us that light always finds its way back. Give this video a thumbs up if you believe in second chances, and share it with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to start again. Have you ever been given a second chance? When you thought all chances were gone? Tell us your story in the comments below. We read every single one, and your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And remember, sometimes healing sounds like a lullaby played for a stranger. Sometimes family is just brave people choosing each other. It's never too late for your later to arrive.